Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. We're doing a very special video today with Subboor. It's going to be a reaction video to a video done by Richard Dawkins, where he appears as a guest on a it's almost like an online interview, right?
Yeah.
And they're discussing wokeness, right? And the question that's posed to him is, as people are moving away from Christianity and leaving religion, it seems like that they're turning towards this wokeism or being woke. And is that replacing religion? That was the question that's posed to Richard Dawkins. And we're going to look at his answer and just discuss it as we go along, inshallah.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting... I obviously heard some parts of this before, but I'm sure the viewers are going to find what he says quite interesting and coherent. Incoherent, but nonetheless, we can, I think, coherently break it down.
Inshallah. So let's play it, bro.
Okay, from the beginning, yeah?
Yeah, let's look at the question and then we'll get...
Kind of argument over the past few years, which has seen the development of wokeness in the past 5 or 6 years as a consequence of the decline of Christianity and religion in the culture. And the argument basically says there's a religion-shaped hole in the human psyche. And as Christianity has declined in the West, something has now, there's been a vacuum that something now has to fill. And that's been filled with the belief that essentially the social justice catechism, that speech is harm and that only members of your race can truly understand your suffering, and that straight white men are evil and at the top of an oppressive hierarchy, and that group traits can be applied to individuals, and I can dismiss what you're saying because of your identity. And this whole thing has in some ways had a religious character to it. You've seen the development of things like white fragility and Robin DiAngelo, where her best-selling book is preaching this kind of masochism on the part of white people to constantly apologize for the original sin of their racism.
Original sin is exactly right. I mean, it's spot on. That's what, yeah, quite right.
So all of this, part of this has been inflected with a critique of the quote new atheists of yourself and Dennett and Sam Harris and Hitchens, by saying, well, doesn't this prove that you can't just get rid of religion because what might replace it could be worse? What do you make of that?
So before we get to Dawkins' answer, I think it'll be a good idea to sort of briefly define this whole concept of being woke or wokeism. Yeah, it's hard to do, obviously, because it means so many different things to so many people today. But generally what I want to know your thoughts on it as well, but generally what I get when I hear the word woke or this term wokeism now is it's this idea where people are supposedly waking up, right? That they've woken up to the oppression of the world, that they want to stand for almost everything and anything. But at the same time, what's really interesting, where it seems like that they're standing for nothing. Because if you stand for everything, then those things may, go against each other as well. Yeah. So it's very confusing, and it's not surprising, because if you look at this postmodernist environment, this world that we're a part of today, it creates that fertile ground for such a new religion or way of life, right? Because it's your choice. Truth is what you want to make it. You do what you want to do. You stand for what you want to stand for. Morals are as you dictate, etc. So it's a bit of a biryani type of...
Yeah. I mean, these guys, you can imagine them that they are thirsty in the desert, and then they decide to stick a straw in the ground and they think they can get juice, but they're not, because there's nothing there. It's empty, it's dry, it's completely devoid of any philosophical foundations.
Yep.
There's no coherency there. So essentially it's the liberal perspective gone to its mad end, right? From a cultural, sociological point of view. So people are like, I'm standing for this, and I'm woke because of this, and and like what's this guy's name? Coleman mentioned. They sort of point to a certain race and say, okay, they're the most oppressive, and then it's this. It's a cool thing now. You find a lot of millennials and Gen Z, these type of people, going for this, but clearly. It does have the hallmarks of religion. Yeah. And the question that he's asked him is, well, aren't we just going from one religion?
Yeah, it's like they're trying to escape nihilism. It's a desperate attempt to escape nihilism, to try and live an ethical life, to do what's right. But like you said, because there's no grounding philosophically in their worldview, it's just they're jumping around without any sort of results. It's like doing a lot of effort for nothing.
Yeah.
Like think about standing for a moral cause, right? You believe to be moral. Well, you have to have a understanding of or grounding for objective morals to begin with.
Yeah.
And then you could build upon that as to, okay, what I believe is right, why I should stand for it, being motivated to stand for it, etc. It's just, it's strange, bro. That's all I can say, man.
Yeah.
So let's see what Dawkins has to say in response to that question.
And if the idea is that there's a religion-shaped hole, which needs to be filled, I think that's condescending and unnecessarily contemptuous of humanity. It would be pathetic if humans had a need to have, if they've lost Christianity, say, they have to have something else. They can't just...
Just before we get into it, who cares if it's condescending or pathetic or, it's demeaning towards human beings? Let's stick to the science, right? It doesn't matter if you think it's condescending or if you doesn't think of us in a highly way. So what he's doing here is essentially he is dealing with, let's just say, a supposed fact that people are moving away from Christianity to wokeism, and he's trying to challenge it using values. How does that make any sense when you're supposed to be the scientist? You're supposed to be actually looking at this from a perspective of, hey, isn't that interesting how people are just switching from one religion to another? Can you see what he's trying to do here? He's trying to use this sort of emotive language to try and get people to push away this idea without actually engaging with it intellectually.
Yeah, I think what becomes evident when you hear him speaking here, he's not really speaking as a scientist. He's really just speaking as an old naturalist, atheist, who's trying to push his agenda, which is really dead and outdated and no one really cares for anymore. That's what it seems like.
Yeah, so it does. And just to add something before, like he calls it pathetic and he calls it condescending and whatnot, to replace a religion with something just as absurd. So wokeism, Christianity to wokeism. Well, what about Darwinism or Scientism or liberalism or humanism or feminism or any of these type of new isms which are all sprouting from the same fountain of naturalism? What about these things which have been called religions, which have actually been highlighted as having sociological aspects which are identical to religion? So if you're going to, push the door, it's going to swing back at you. It swings both ways. What makes you think that you can, make this sort of claim and still hold on to his strong values? Because he is somebody who has very egalitarian values, whatever that means, from his identities that he subscribes to, and obviously other people have others. How can you not see the fact that you are undermining your own perspective as well when you talk about these things?
Yep. It's going to become more apparent, bro. Let's keep watching this.
Can't just take the world as it is, take reality as it is, take science as it is. They have to fill it with something equally silly, having given up Christianity. I think that's a condescending attitude to humanity, and I would very much hope it's not true. I would prefer.
Okay, he's engaging with the only aspect of it from the angle of condescending or silly or whatever it is, and I hope it's not true. No, you're supposed to actually argue why it's not true, not just talk about what you don't like. I don't like a certain idea, say, that doesn't give it a truth value.
Yeah.
Your feelings, they don't affect the fabric of the cosmos. So he's acting in a very anti-scientific way. Interesting.
Follow the science. It's almost like he's proposing another. He's talking of. I don't know if you get this, but when I'm listening to him, it seems like he's just promoting science. This idea of scientism. Yeah. Science is the way to truth. That's what people need to follow. Almost as if it's a religion in and of itself. That's what he's pushing.
Yeah, and the problem here is that if you say we should follow science and having this excessive belief in science, the scientific worldview, you are calling towards a value-based system.
Yes.
You are basically saying this is the right way. So that in of itself is something which is not scientific.
Yep.
That's a value-based judgment. And you're calling towards that worldview. So it's inescapable. It's inescapable to have these values, and what essentially he's having to do is he's having to square the circle, but it's not adding up.
Yeah, absolutely.
That when people lose religion, when people lose supernatural religion, they do not fill it with some other notion of original sin, as you put it, quite correctly. But that they might fill it with a love of truth, a love of science, a love of the study of reality.
This is the last point I wanted you to deal with.
Okay, so
what he's mentioning here.
So firstly, let's just deal with something.
Yeah.
Right? Love. What is love? Love can be broken down to essentially chemicals to help you survive and reproduce, or actually chemicals which are there to help your survival and reproduction in terms of kin selection or reciprocal altruism, or Steven Pinker's expanding circle. So let's not use this flowery unscientific language, Mr. Dawkins, right? Love does not exist from your perspective. And then truth. Okay, so when we're speaking about truth, why is truth valuable? Is it instrumentally valuable or is it intrinsically valuable? Now, if it's instrumentally valuable, then it doesn't actually matter whether something is true or not. We just have to look at, okay, how is this going to benefit us? And if it's intrinsically valuable, well, you'll have to have some sort of grounding for that. And the best grounding for instrumental, the intrinsic value of truth that human beings do actually believe in is something metaphysical beyond human beings that has given it that spirit. And what we would say is that because God is the truth, God is Al-Haq, He is the one who's put this within us to value truth intrinsically, because He is the ultimate truth and He wants us to know the truth and follow the truth. And of course, anything that we do in our life, we should be truthful people. So at the end of the day, if you don't have religion, don't talk about truth, don't talk about love, talk about genes, the body being a replication machine, the highest value of life being survival and reproduction. Stick to that. Leave religion for the people who actually believe in religion, even though it's inescapable from your perspective. But I think what we're really getting at here is none of what he's saying is actually scientific at all.
Yeah, and that's the thing that sticks out to me more than anything. Is when he speaks about science, and he's using these terms truth and love and science almost in the same sentence, and it seems like there's a link between all of them. And again, it's coming across.
It's a non sequitur. Yeah, how are they linked?
It's not. But when he says it this way, and when people watch him, right, and this is something people watching this video need to realize, is when atheists like him take the terms like science, love, truth, and chuck them all into one, phrase or paragraph when they're speaking, and they try to create this narrative that, which essentially what they're saying is science itself is a type of religion. That's what you should follow. That's going to give you your values. That's going to give you your truth. That's going to give you everything. When in reality, that's not the case. Science is just a method that we use.
Oil and water do not mix. If you put oil and water in a blender and you press the button and it starts making that crazy sound, that's what he's doing. He's trying to confuse people through his jargon, through his his flowery way of trying to link these things. But once the blender switches off and you actually see what's in front of you, you see oil and water is not going to mix. So his worldview, his value-based system, his sort of perspective, his religious perspective essentially, is not something which is scientific. So remember, I think the way we can end this particular episode is that not everything a scientist says is necessarily scientific.
Yes.
And the problem that we have nowadays is that people use the mantle of science, but then start talking about philosophy and screwing it up, theology and screwing it up, metaphysics and screwing it up, values and screwing it up, and above all, they are using an authority in a way to misrepresent what the science is coming to a conclusion of. So in effect, these people are the true anti-scientific people in the world.
Yeah, they're making a joke of science.
Because they're essentially making people believe that science is coming to certain conclusions when it actually is not. And these are just their values they're imposing.
Yeah, absolutely. So brothers and sisters, I hope that was beneficial. Like, one of the things, again, I just want to emphasize it, brothers and sisters, when you watch this, I think let's give sort of take-home points here. For me, the biggest take-home point of this watching this clip was this was a great demonstration of when an atheist scientist, or I shouldn't even say, like, an atheist, a naturalist, tries to jump onto the camel of science, right, and ride it all over the place. He just tries to propose that science is a religion. That's what he's saying in not too many words. Science is what you should follow. This is the be all and end all, when in reality that's not. And coming from a scientist that's, supposedly been a scientist for what, 30, 40, 50, how long has he been doing science for?
Yeah, I mean, we can go into his scientific
decades, right?
Yeah,
I mean, he's a biologist, right? But the point is that, like you said, everything that a scientist says is not
but you
scientific.
can't question him. He's a scientist.
It doesn't matter.
So this is what we get from people, right?
Yeah.
You can't question him. He's a scientist. Well, actually, aren't you the guys who are telling us that we should be rational, we should be free thinkers? So why are you trying to put monopoly on thinking?
Yes.
No, you're not allowed to think. Secondly, how many scientists actually agree with him? How many scientists actually see that he's talking above his pay grade? How many philosophers have pointed out this guy's incoherent?
Yeah.
So the fact is, you can't, when you get religious people who start talking about creation and start talking about science, then you get all these atheists, new atheists saying, oh, how dare you? What credentials do you have?
You're not a
blah, blah,
scientist.
blah. You're not a scientist. But then when a scientist, supposed scientist, is actually talking about things which contradict what other scientists say, misrepresenting the field, conflating theology and philosophy and science and coming up with a sort of incoherent worldview, then we have the right to say, no, he has as much qualification in talking about theology as much as a rat does in terms of talking about human rights or metaphysics. He's completely out of his depth here.
Yeah.
And we need to be very honest. We need to be very honest that we're getting really ratty, rubbish answers from this guy. And it's about time that people need to stop taking him so seriously.
Absolutely. That's it, bro. Jazakallah khair. Brothers and sisters, let us know your thoughts in the comments section below, and we'll see you guys next time. Assalamu alaikum.